welcome to our live stream with our fantabulous Sugar Rush sponsors. You all know snack is important at Fabric February. So we have some of our top tier sponsors here helping ensure that we get all the snacks during the event so you're prepped and ready to go for all of your learning. So welcome to all of you from today. And I think I am
Thank
just
you.
going to hand it over to you and you can start the show because we're all here to learn about this amazing framework and just dive into all the tech. So take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody joining, and thank you for having us, Katarina. We're very excited to be here with you. Do you want to pull up our presentation? Thank you so much. So our topics today is we're going to be showcasing our framework-based approach to building an enterprise data platform. Of course, Fabric is in the mix, not only in the mix, it's in the very center of this presentation. We have I was going to say a short agenda. The agenda is just we're going to be introducing ourselves a little bit so you'll know who's talking to you. We are going to introduce our fast track framework for Fabric, and then we're going to be discussing how we set up this solution, what kind of ingestion patterns we use, what we do for orchestration, and how we're utilizing metadata to make this all happen. I think first of all, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Anne. I work as a global lead advisor in our data and AI part of Today. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I can go next. Hi, I'm Ramez. I've been working at data in Twoday for roughly 3.5 years. I've been working with Fabric since the private preview, since the summer of 2023. So it's been some time. And within Twoday, I'm mostly working on the development of our data platform offerings. And my primary focus has been Fabric for the last 2 years. I've worked with multiple enterprise customers utilizing Fabric, and today I'll be sharing that experience.
Thanks, Ramez. And well, my name is Juhani Katajisto from Twoday as well. I've been with the company roughly 9 years now, working as well from the beginning when Fabric became available in private preview. I guess, Ramez, we were in the same project, if I can recall correctly. And background is in data engineering and have been helping various enterprise level customers with their data journey, and talking more here today on one example journey that we had where we utilized the Twoday framework for Fabric platform and how we migrated away from a legacy system as an example.
Great.
So,
next slide.
Yeah.
We are Today, we are a Nordic technology company, and we work with applied AI and data and Fabric, of course, but we also work with cloud platforms and security, digital engineering, and business applications. And we work within different, let's say, markets or domains like health and life sciences, energy and utilities, industrials and manufacturing, and also government. So we are both in the public sector and in the private sector. And since we're a Nordic company, we are spread across 34 locations and counting, I would say, across Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Lithuania. And we are about 3,000 technologists, and we have the opportunity here today to actually invest in our own company, and 40% of us are actually investors. So we, let's say, we really believe in the company that we work in. And what we do is we just want to create a better tomorrow through the use of AI and technology. Next slide. We are also a very proud sponsor of Fabric February. I think this is our 3rd year sponsoring the event, and we think that Fabric February is truly a really, really great event. It brings some of the very, very best and most recognized speakers of the data platform community to Oslo, to small Oslo, to share their knowledge and create a really nice opportunity for networking and community. And we think that's really great. So we are proud to be sponsoring this year's event as well. So if you see us at Fabric February, which you will, we will have a stand. So please come and talk to us at our stand. Or if you see one of our colleagues in the wild, come and talk to us. We want to hear from you and get to know you. We also have a couple of colleagues, myself included, who are going to be delivering some sessions during Fabric February. So if you want to join any of our sessions, you are more than welcome to that. But we know, of course, there's a tough competition. There are so many really, really great sessions at Fabric February this year. And as Katrine mentioned in the beginning, we are the Sugar Rush sponsor. So please think of us when you enjoy the sugary snacks during Fabric February. I think that's all from me. I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues now, who are going to be delivering what you're all here to hear about, our metadata-driven framework for building data platforms. Take it away, guys.
Excellent. So thank you all. So starting with the introductions to what we call the Twoday fast track framework. You might be thinking, what is it? What is the Twoday fast track framework? And well, it's in its core, it's a bunch of technical components that make up the framework, notebooks, pipelines, and other Fabric-native components playing seamlessly together. But that's sort of the simplified version of it, and we sort of created it to answer a question or sort of help out on the dilemma that how can we fast track development with our customers. How can we jump in and provide them value with the platform, Fabric being one of the most utilized one. So we needed to have a fast, repeatable, and consistent way on developing on enterprise scale platforms, and then these individual components become sort of the sum and the core of the principle that we are delivering the framework with. Our experience so far, we've been able to roll out the framework to multiple enterprise level customers here in the Nordics, but not just enterprise level. It fits really to the small and mid-level customers as well, because it's pretty flexible in its core, lives natively inside of Fabric. And I might even add one item. I know that we are here talking mostly about the Fabric, but the same framework is available and able to perform in other platforms which rhyme as well with the Lego bricks and the cornflake too. So you might recognize them too. And Ramez here, as introduced, he's actually one of the main developers for the framework in question. So he does truly have the subject matter expertise.
All right. I think I can take it from here and go briefly over the main pillars or principles behind this fast track framework. One key thing that I would like to add is that this is not just a set of resources like notebooks or pipelines. At its core, these are the elements. However, it's a lot more than that. It's more like a ways of working and development practices to help you develop rapidly, consistently, and most importantly, in a simple way, your data platform and integrating, transforming, and ingesting your data sources. So starting with the first principle is the architecture and infrastructure as code. Ideally for our framework, when we were thinking about this originally, we were thinking that this needs to be fast. This should not take weeks or months to set up, but this should be a couple of hours of time for setup. And for that, we decided to utilize Terraform. And with that, we were able to deliver this framework within hours or at most days to be fully functional and operational. The second, and I would say the most important principle here, is that it is metadata-driven. That's where, of course, that's where the name comes from, and that is the main principle behind this. It needs to be easy and very extensible to add new sources, new entities. It should be very simple process to do that. And for that, we're utilizing JSON files where we can provide the metadata and adding a new source or entity is as simple as adding a new object within the JSON file where we specify this is going to be a SQL source or an API source or an event hub source, and then you can define exactly what you're loading. And you do not need to worry about the inner implementation because it's built to dynamically handle that with the metadata. The third principle is management and governance, and for that we are utilizing AD groups. So all of the accesses and permissions are handled through AD groups, which are defined in the configuration in the Terraform template. So by doing that, you can very easily roll out your access groups to all of the different environments from one central and governed place. The fourth pillar is consistency and standardization. And for an enterprise level data platform, it is always a hassle if you have many different sources integrated and loaded through different approaches. You end up with your bronze and silver layers without the exact same standard. So for example, you don't know what the metadata columns are. If you're using historization, what are the hashing columns, or what are the columns to specify if a storage change dimension has been updated, and so forth. So utilizing a standardized approach makes sure that all of your sources, all of your entities have a stable structure. You know what to expect, and consequently, it makes the goal layer development a lot simpler. The fifth pillar is standardized development workflows, and for this, we are utilizing DevOps, the best DevOps practices. We have ready-to-use templates for Azure DevOps and GitHub Enterprise to roll out the solution to the different environments, and for that, we're utilizing the Fabric CI/CD library. The final principle is scalability and modularity, and for that, we're essentially using a Python. It's using classes, functions, and packaging so that it's very easy to deploy, update, and extend. In a lot of our deployments, we have custom extensions that fit these environments specifically. So I would say these are the main pillars for this framework that we thought of and started working towards around 2 years ago, and here we are.
Thank you, Ramez. And probably the key takeaway out of these all, I'd say, is the metadata-driven part. You will see that from the presentation moving forward, mentioned multiple times, since that's in the core of our, philosophy, how we like to work on the data platforms, and what is, the heart of the framework, essentially. So next up, we're going to take a look of the reference architecture with a Fabric-based platform where the data modeling is handled through the Medallion-architecture. So basically, what it supports, the framework, it can live and it can ingest any type of source which we can land on Azure Storage or OneLake, or are able to shortcut to the OneLake shortcutting available for the bronze layer and then processing further. So you will see later that in our use case with this one enterprise platform, we utilize Synapse Analytics, or ADF, for the ingestion, with reasons I will be going in more detail later on. But it can fit to the reference architecture, because as I mentioned, if you're able to utilize the OneLake or storages, you're good to go with the framework. One thing I like to point out, that typically in our implementations, you would have a version of DBT available for your gold layer work. It isn't explicitly said in here, but in our example use case, we do leverage DBT for the gold. Most typical scenarios how our users then ingest the data might be through Power BI, whether they are utilizing the semantic model with a third-party application or through the reports. It varies, but of course with the Fabric's capabilities on sharing the data, especially through the Microsoft ecosystem, the options are pretty limitless.
All right. maybe I can take it from here and go
Yeah,
over the
go ahead,
architecture
please.
very briefly. I'll be going on higher level, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and we can go through them later. But maybe starting with the kind of innermost part, which is the workspaces. Essentially, we have one workspace per environment level, so one for dev, one for test, etc. And within that workspace, we have all of the framework-related components that handle the integrations, orchestration, and so forth. So for these, we're using notebooks, pipelines, variable library, an environment object, lakehouses, and we also have a monitoring report from which you can see the performance and the statuses of the jobs that have been running recently. If we go one level higher, all of this is source controlled in source control repository, whether it's GitHub Enterprise or Azure DevOps. And the deployment, as I mentioned earlier, is done through CI/CD pipelines, whether they are DevOps pipelines or GitHub Actions and workflows. We utilize the Fabric CI/CD library to deploy and roll out to all of the different environments. And we also have a different pipeline that handles the infrastructure setup. So this utilizes Terraform, and that sets up all the infrastructure we need, such as the capacity, workspaces, key vault, etc. The metadata for the framework lies in a Git repository as well. It can be within the same repository. It can be in a separate repository. Initially, this was stored within the file section in the lakehouse, which it's still possible, but it's not recommended because you get so much value if you source control this. You can keep track of what is exactly being deployed at the moment. You can roll back to previous versions. You can very easily roll out the same metadata to the different environments by copying and making the needed necessary changes and so forth. I think this is a general idea of the architecture, and maybe to show the flow, we have all of the sources on the left, whether it's SAP, SQL sources, event-based sources, etc. These are ingested through these dynamic pipeline templates and notebooks that we have that through the metadata figure out what source type it is and what is the needed way to integrate it. Ingest this, write it to lakehouses, usually in a separate workspace for the different data domains. And then these are consumed by the application, whether they are PBI reports or AI and ML solutions and so forth.
Thank you, Ramez. And one question on the metadata at the lakehouses or in a Git repository. Could we utilize a mix and match solution as well? That in some scenarios you would have them in DevOps and some in the lakehouse in the JSON format.
Yes, of course, it's possible to define maybe multiple sources of your metadata, so that your metadata can live in multiple places. But of course, as a best practice, it's better to have it in one place in a more controlled place, so that you know exactly what's being deployed without having to go through different locations. But in theory, it's possible, but I wouldn't go with that.
Yeah, I mean, in some scenarios, one of these platforms, whether it's Lakehouse or some kind of Git repository, you can generate them and needed metadata from outside system, and then it's an individual deployment case that which tools they have available for, let's say, the metadata generation, which will then further speed up the deployments typically. But then if we move a bit forward, there's a picture about the modular versus the centralized approach with the framework, and you might be wondering what that is, and I tried to portray with the picture, simple picture, the best I could. So in our example use case here, we utilized the central approach, and that goes with the reference architecture, which was shown in the previous picture, that we basically have a set of Fabric workspaces where the FastTrack framework is being deployed. That are typically it's called then the framework workspace or the FastTrack workspace, and it has all the pipelines, the necessary notebooks, the lakehouses, all the components that come with the deployment, and then based on the permissions given to the child workspaces, this one centralized one can orchestrate and utilize and load items in a number of other workspaces which are linked to the central one. Then again, it's about the metadata, that how you would orchestrate the workspace one's items to be loaded in what order, and it can all be handled through this one central location. We chose this approach because in our philosophy it would help with the ease of use. Let's say that you have a separate support team. They would only need to take a look on one workspace where they would find the necessary logging for any loads, the necessary monitoring reports, for example. They're all there in one place. And of course, as we go further and develop the framework to the new versions, that we are more easily able to deploy the latest versions, since it's just a handful of centralized workspaces that we need to do it to. But having said that, we do support the modular approach as well, which would mean that the framework is installed natively into any given workspace. So you could sort of containerize the framework and then have a standalone operation inside of it. So if you have a mission critical scenario that you would have to need to have the isolation level in place, that is also supported. But as I said, centralized, the most typical approach that we taken. So then jumping to the example use case. So continuing with the core, having the metadata theming in here. So we are talking about how we utilize the metadata here and how it enabled us to utilize legacy systems in tandem with Fabric and speeding up some migration activities that we needed to do from a Synapse based environment into a Fabric one. So basically our starting point, we had a Synapse SQL dedicated SQL pool for the data warehouse, and we had a Synapse Analytics for handling the integrations, the ingestion part. And the environment in question have existed roughly 5 years now. It is still ongoing, by the way. We haven't fully migrated it into the Fabric yet, but rather started the journey some time ago to test it out. And during those 5 years, the environment has grown substantially. I recall we started somewhere DV 500 level for the production environment in some Synapse Power levels, and I recall we are currently somewhere sitting at 2050 for the dedicated pool size. And during that time, we've added tens of new source systems, integrated them to the Synapse platform, which contributed greatly on expanding it. There's a handful of ERP level source systems, so a lot of transactional data, and then a couple of master data like systems and a bunch of APIs. Well, you really name it. We probably have integrated it to the legacy platform we are talking about in here. So its capabilities that we sort of needed to adhere and exceed with Fabric was that it is continuously providing insight for roughly 1,000 of users on a monthly level, but it's capable of serving multiple thousands. So from this premise, we needed to see how Fabric can help us in creating the next generation enterprise data platform, which is a lakehouse centric. So, and it would need to be prepared for the future too, with the ease of sharing that Fabric greatly provides. with its native components, and it would need to have been ready for AI implementations too. So again, we'll see the metadata playing a key role in this. So about the modeling practices, and I wanted to emphasize, on left there's the sort of the legacy side, and on the right the Fabric-based, the next gen approach. So for legacy, we utilized a raw data vault, which meant that we basically modeled our satellite tables to be one-to-one against the source system, and stored the metadata throughout in the process, that how we created the data vault, that it was in a reutilizable format for the next gen. And of course, when we created the legacy system, we didn't create the metadata necessarily to be future proof. Of course, that was in our minds as well, but rather to have it in a replicatable format. And lucky for us that we did, because ultimately with our framework approach, we were able to lift a lot from the legacy system and form sort of the basis for our Fabric platform, which was Medallion-architecture based. So if you think about the raw data vault and the satellites over there, what we gathered was, of course, the private key information, what makes a row unique, but as well we gathered the information for the ingestion part too. That how can we have the metadata which run both the ingestion and then the data vault side, and we had that. So when jumping into the Fabric, I'm going to show with some examples that we were able to reutilize just that for the bronze layer, the ingestions, and then for the historization/silver in Fabric. And bear in mind, we didn't have any kind of fixed integrations in the legacy system, so everything was metadata-driven through the Synapse Analytics. And then expanding a bit more on the metadata utilization for especially the ingestion part. So some background: when we started this, transition, roughly 1.5 years ago. Help me out, Ramez. When did we dip to Fabric first with this example? Can't hear you, by the way. You might be mute.
Yep, I am. I think it was sometime in 2024, so roughly a year and a half.
Yeah, Fabric was quite fresh still, well after the private preview. But anyway, back then, Fabric, the on-prem gateways were in preview state or not even available. Can't recall. So we needed to have some sort of approach to reliably ingest on-premise data, because the example customer here, they heavily utilized on-premise sources. So some sort of way was needed to get that data into Fabric, fed that into the Fabric. So with these starting points, we thought that, hey, we have a pretty reliable sort of way of ingesting with the legacy platform over at the Synapse Analytics, what we internally like to call the dynamic integration engine, which was just a standardized set of pipelines really that were metadata driven. So the metadata that I mentioned in the previous example for the ingestion, you can see actually an example here on the top that how it actually looked like. So we had some example source system like SQL, the most heavily used, that you would catch some of the necessary information that you would load from a on-premise Microsoft SQL source, for example. And when fed to the pipeline, you were able to create the necessary Parquet files, which were then virtualized for the Synapse dedicated SQL pool to ingest. So, and keep in mind, we had this setup running for the 5 years period, or even a bit longer at this stage, that it was proven to be pretty good. So we didn't have any problems with ingestions or the ingestion part. So basically we made a copy of it into another Synapse and copied the pipeline structures and how we utilize the metadata. But instead of utilizing our Azure SQL database, which was feeding the metadata to the pipelines, we leveraged the warehouse as the metadata store at the starting point. And bear in mind, we didn't have any Fabric SQL databases available at that time, so the warehouse was the most obvious choice because it supported a lot of the functionalities that the Azure SQL database had. So for landing as well, we were already ingesting into Parquet with the legacy solution. So instead of writing into the ADLS Gen 2 storage for the legacy, we started to write into the Fabric Lakehouse, which was in our case the landing zone and the entry into the bronze. When we completed the pipeline with the framework of ours, we were able to achieve a situation where our source system ingestions were provided in a Parquet format for the framework to ingest further on and historize. So Ramez, anything on this part, the ingestion?
Yeah, maybe one thing I would like to add here is that, so in this migration case, we end up, as Juhani mentioned, deciding to utilize the existing this integration engine because it has been already used, it's been robust, and it already is operational. So, and of course, the problem with the gateways when we started, so that was one of the reasons we decided with that. However, our framework has support to natively integrate lots of sources. So for example, it can natively integrate pretty much all SQL sources, file-based sources. So CSVs, Parquet, JSON, Avro files, it can integrate from APIs through multiple different authentication methods, whether you're using an API key or OAuth or other different types. It can also integrate event hubs, data, and Kafka endpoints natively. So all of these can be done just through the metadata without the need for warehouses or utilizing this integration engine. But this was utilized back then because there were lots of things back in preview and this was already functional. So for that use case, it made sense to use that instead of essentially starting over.
Okay, from the ingestion, I jump to the next layer, the historization.
Just interrupt 1 second. We have a couple of questions, and the first one is examples of the notebooks. Will you be either showing it today, or could you point us to where attendees can look at that? And then I think that was from earlier, but people want to see code. So if you have something to share, or if it's possible to read more about that somewhere, I'll make sure to share those links. And then the other is a question that we just got on deployment between dev tests and prod. Does your metadata contain connection IDs instead of names, for example? Or if you will talk more about deployment later, we can just save that.
Sure. Regarding the first question, unfortunately, I don't think we'll be sharing the notebooks today. We'll be showing some of the metadata structures for the integrations as well as the processing and orchestration. And I can give a general idea about the content of these notebooks. So essentially, we're utilizing Python classes to handle the whole processes. So for example, we have a class to handle the server processing. So you will be defining the merge type, or whether you're using SCD2 or rebuild or append logic and so forth. And then it will handle that logic to transform the bronze data into the server tables. We have similar classes for the bronze, for the ingestion, and for the orchestration and metadata handling. I'm not entirely sure if we'll be sharing these notebooks today.
We can get to that maybe later. We don't have them here in the presentation, but maybe something that we can look what can we share later on. So we'll be getting back to that.
Yes.
Definitely later.
Regarding the second question regarding the deployment, I can answer this now as well. How we do the deployment, we are utilizing the Fabric CI/CD library. And with that, we have the parameters.yaml file where we can parameterize all of these things. One thing to keep in mind as well is that for the metadata, as this source controlled, it does not necessarily have to be within the same repo. And one key principle we opted to use from the beginning is that we're going to have a different set of metadata files for the different environments. So we have the metadata files for dev are different than for test and so forth. And with such approach, you can have everything within the metadata that's specific to that environment without the hassle of worrying about the deployment.
And on the secrets part, which I recall was asked as well, that we do leverage the key vault. Of course.
Utilizing the key vault, all accesses are done through ideally service principals, and secrets for those are fetched from key vaults. We have separate key vault instances for the different environments, and ideally you can use the exact same secret names in the different environments by having the different secrets in key vault to point to the relevant service principle. But yeah, maybe specific to the question, do we use connection ID or names? We try to use friendly names whenever possible throughout the whole framework.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, please do shoot those questions if you have more. I might need to change the pacing of the slides a bit, but that's okay. Okay, not a problem. So we were about to jump into the historization, checking, did our data vault look, and how would our silver table look? So what was the transition on the raw data vault satellites into the silver layer tables? And again, keeping with the metadata theme, I mentioned that we did keep a good record on what was the data vault look like especially the satellites, that what made the data vault object, and with this information, mainly the private key information, which we were able to deliver from many of the related source systems within Fabric and with the schema inference capabilities, and possibly mapping some data types or other related information from source systems. It wasn't really a problem to lift and shift some of the most crucial data vault objects into the silver level. And it wasn't just the migration part really for us, that with Fabric and especially the tie-in of the integration metadata to the source system metadata and combining with the schema inference, silver layer creation also became somewhat of a trivial thing. Anything, Ramez, on the silver or the historization you'd like to add?
I think you summed it up pretty well. Nothing from my side here.
Great. Then moving on to some of the ingestion patterns in the example use case, which I'd be showcasing the environment architecture a bit. So you can see here side by side the comparison of the legacy system in a simplified manner, that we had the source systems, which most typically were different variations of SQL. We had APIs, we had CSVs, other data types provided through the storage accounts typically, and we had the dynamic integration engine, which I mentioned, run by the metadata, and then loading into Parquet files, which were then virtualized into dedicated SQL pool tables and then further historized and utilized in various scenarios. So moving to the Fabric-based solution, what we did, as I explained, we lifted the dynamic integration engine of the Synapse and move it to the Fabric-based solution, which we can see more clearly here. So combining everything that mattered from the legacy system, keeping the metadata-driven methodology alive, and enabling the Fabric-native components being added in to the Fabric-based platform enabled us to efficiently utilize what was created over the years, which we knew that worked really well. And then it helped us to answer some problems that we faced with the Synapse platform. So for example, SharePoint is a source that in our example use case was heavily utilized. And if you noticed, Fabric provided pretty good capabilities lately for the SharePoint item shortcutting, which really helped us a lot on helping on ingesting a lot of the different files that the customer has kept in their own SharePoint. So that is an example use case that a couple hours of development enabled us to get a hold of, you know, various SharePoint items which previously needed a lot of work to get our hands on. And of course, something which is, well, definitely doable within Synapse, but which becomes much easier are the event-driven items and their historizations. And Ramez actually has a really good example implementation that we did from an event-driven source. So maybe you can share some experiences from that.
Sure, yeah. For that particular case, we utilized event hubs from Azure to ingest the data. Essentially, the data was written in Avro files every, if I remember correctly, 15 minutes, and then the transformation engine would essentially pick up all of these files and then use them to build the server table in the correct order and by expanding the schema. It was the case then, and it usually is the case for event-based data, that the responses or the events schema or structure sometimes expands. So we built we had built-in support to accommodate that, and it's been working quite well, I would say, for the last year, a bit over a year.
Thanks, Ramez. So summarizing our approach here, that are how we were able to utilize the most meaningful parts from the legacy and connect all the Fabric's great capabilities into one, and how it enabled us to create a scalable Fabric-based data platform. So as you can see, the working Azure Synapse-based integration pipelines, plus the Fabric-native connectors, shortcutting capabilities most importantly, and when combined with the metadata from the legacy source systems and keeping the framework structure in a metadata format too, that's where we ended up with the ultimate goal here. And this is not just about, you know, how we were able to do this with this one example use case, but how we would be able to, you know, expand further. And we can see that when something is metadata driven and you have saved the core of your platform in this format, it will be, you know, more precious than a pound of gold when you think in the big picture and into the further horizon as well. There will be use cases for that data. So maybe one more quick word on still the legacy ingestion part there, that there really isn't any items preventing on migrating the Synapse natively into Fabric altogether. Fabric has matured generously throughout the years, and we would now have all the necessary components available, you know, or utilize the notebook approach to perform a lot of the integrations through metadata that way. And Ramez, you mentioned in the beginning that we do support a lot of these source systems already with the notebook approach.
Yep, we do.
All right, then some words on the orchestration, which we had in the legacy system as well, and how our approach with the framework handles the dilemma. So what was our starting point? We had something called the Twoday data vault modeler in use, which is a in-house built tool to accelerate data vault development and orchestrate a data platform as well. We have it implemented in multiple enterprise level customers, and our source for truth was here to begin with. The modeler is typically interfaced through a web application, but it housed its information in metadata format as well in SQL database. So when we started to draft the fast track framework in the beginning, we sort of wanted to have a easy approach for these migrations, as probably everybody's in our profession has seen a migration project of any sort. They are pretty common. So we wanted to have a easy way of moving also the orchestration practices into the new world. So here's an example of a JSON file living in a lakehouse, which is housing the orchestration metadata. But as Ramez mentioned, this same file could be mastered in any kind of Git repository as well, or even should.
Yeah, I would add it can and it 100% should be source controlled. It is possible to have it in the lakehouse, but it's not recommended and it should not be used unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, exactly. And the previous layer items, which I mentioned, the ingestion and the historization, you can see from the example that we have a sort of a master job here to process a SQL source. First, we introduce the pipeline to be called by the orchestration for the bronze layer generation, and then we move for the silver processing. And in the example, we utilize the DBT cloud for the gold level layer processing, and are able to call the DBT processing to go ahead if the previous layers have successfully loaded.
Maybe I can add a little bit on this, on some sort of task that can be orchestrated. So this is built to be as dynamic and generic as possible. So some example tasks that could be run are, of course, the ingestion, server processing, but it can also run stored procedures, SQL queries, run DBT jobs, refresh semantic models. And of course, if you need to do anything custom, you can also just run a Fabric pipeline or Fabric notebook, as well as call APIs. So all of these are possible task types that could be utilized. Of course, it's documented as it should, because without documentation, it will be a mess to try to add anything. But yeah, these are kind of example of the generic tasks that are supported, and it can be easily extended to support more. But in our experience, these have been generally sufficient, at least as a starting point.
Yeah, and there's a next slide about the future, but I might dip into that a bit here, since the growth of different data mesh implementations, for example, we can see that there's a growing need to being able to be part of event trigger orchestrations or be part of that picture, that something is launched by an event and then something happens, and then you would need to receive a output from something and then process further. So that is growing a lot, that philosophy, and we can support it in a way that we can receive the triggering from an external API. That, let's say, the bronze and silver level ingestions are completed successfully with the event, and then that pipeline will present itself being successful in an API, and then call for a job to be processed, for example, where the rest of the tasks include a DBT processing, and then in the end, typically there would be a PBI semantic model refresh if you utilize import mode, for example. So that combination is as well available, but to simplify things a bit, we've kept the job and task from bronze, silver, gold level here, which is run in phases. Then about the future, how do we see the future? And well, as you've probably seen from the presentation, we are really keen on the metadata and being able to utilize it for the whole enterprise level data platforms creation, and how you keep it running with the metadata. So one good point is the AI, Gen AI implementations for the metadata. Since a lot of the source systems typically that we interact with, they are able to self-describe itself. You can get the schema from multiple various different kind of source systems. You can get the private key information from the source, and when you really combine that information with AI, you end up being in a situation that you can create metadata with prompts. And if your platform already is running fully on top of the metadata, then you would be in a pretty great place, because you can utilize agents, for example, to create these integrations for you, create, let's say, the silver layer metadata with prompts, further speeding up the progress and deployments in such as the scenarios that we present in here. Ramez, any takeaways from you?
Do you orchestrate per source or more like a DAG per item? Well, at the moment, our jobs, as I was mentioning, can be generic. So you can, within the same job, orchestrate multiple sources. You can orchestrate a single source. The granularity is that you can do it either on the source level or the entity level. So for us, all of our bronze and silver objects we call entities. So essentially, you can specify a source to load and then specify a specific filter to load only a set or exactly one, or a group of entities from that source, or possibly for multiple sources. These are all possible. In the most general case, it's done on this source level for generic sources, and for sources that are very big with hundreds of tables, groups are utilized so that we are loading them in groups so that they don't cause any, so that they are loaded in proper order, and ultimately the order that they are needed for on the gold layer consumption.
Thanks, Ramez. And maybe one thing still to be added here, that the orchestration scenarios, you would have the event-driven environment. You would need to have some items to be completed in an exactly given schedule, or a flexible schedule as well, that it would need to complete on something would need to complete on any given time on a third Thursday of a March or something really complex. So the example orchestration that I mentioned might not be fully suitable in all of these scenarios. So we are exploring availability or the possibilities of implementing some third-party orchestration tools for the framework as well, or the ways that we are working. We have a one in-house built tool called Byflow, which is as well metadata-driven orchestration, which could run any Fabric environment as well. Or there's the Fabric enabled Airflow nowadays, which was recently released for Fabric 2. So we are exploring different ways how to be able to handle more and more complex orchestration scenarios too. Okay, that ends the slide portion, and time for the questions and answers.
Yeah, so I think you were able to answer the questions during the session, but we can just give attendees a couple of minutes to submit any more questions. But outside of that, just a little round of applause. Thank you so much for presenting this. Lots of useful information. Do you want to say a couple of words about what you will be presenting at Fabric February as well, if you have that ready in your head?
I mean, I can say something about presenting. I will be delivering a session on Git and getting into Git with Power BI. That's a beginner level session, not for Power BI, but if you're not that familiar with Git, that will be an introduction to Git for you, and also how to do version control with Git. And Power BI. So that's one of the sessions. And I have one of my colleagues from here in the Oslo office, Eivind. He is going to be delivering a session on how to do semantic modeling, best practice on semantic modeling, and maintaining the quality of semantic modeling. And I think also we have a colleague from Denmark, David. He is going to present on I'm looking at the agenda right now. Power BI documentation systems, not just an afterthought. So those are at least the ones off the top of my head that are from today. And of course, we have some, we like to call them our colleagues from Tabular Editor, who are also going to be presenting some sessions. So lots of really cool sessions to choose from in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And I do need to point out that none of these are sponsor sessions. These are technical sessions that were submitted and also selected based on the topic itself, because you are amazing people in today with lots of cool experience that we want to share with everyone else. So yeah, not a sponsor session, just technical session by employees, which is
Thank
is
you
really cool.
for pointing that out. This is also, I think, a typical of the colleagues in today. A lot of them have really a lot of really great knowledge, and they're very eager to share, which makes me so proud to be their colleague. So I'm so happy to see multiple colleagues getting into your probably very tight how to say, the needle eye, as we would say in Norway.
Yeah, absolutely. Great sessions selected purely on like the topic and expertise that you have. And with that, I don't see any more questions coming in. We do have attendees saying thank you, and from me as well. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us, and we are excited to meet you at Fabric February as well, at your stand, like you said. Come and have a chat with the people from today. I'm sure they would absolutely love to hear from you as well, and just share those experiences and discuss the future. Lots of AI stuff at the moment, which is a fun topic.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Juhani, Ramez, and Anne,
Thank you for having us
presenting today.
Thank you.
And we will see you all at Fabric February, which is actually, it's next week. Can you imagine? It's just a week and a half away. We will all be there. And with that, have a wonderful day to all of you who attended. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you around. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.